welcome everyone. So today we have a very special guest. We have the European Monitoring Center for Drugs and Drugs Addiction. That is a new agency and reference point of information in terms of drugs and drug addiction in Europe. They're based in Lisbon, so I guess they have better weather than here in Luxembourg, as I can see by the speakers that they have some sunlight crossing their windows, which is great. And today we have a webinar where we will hear more from them. It's a great example on what happens when you are um, adopting an open data driven approach in your organization, in this case, a new agency. We will see how when you are transforming the organizational level on open data and you are using data to visualize information, it can really unleash a lot of potential, no matter in which different business you're working on. So a real example about it is the European Drug Report. That is a yearly publication, and we will hear more about it. So they will explain more on the transition, the challenges, opportunities, lessons learned, and more pragmatic approach on how they made it possible. So we will get started soon, but before that, as you know, some rules of the game. So this webinar will be recorded, and we will share with you the material, the slides, and the recording, and everything will be published on the Data Europa Academy. Um, your opinion is very important for us. We really take your opinion into account to improve our services. So please take a few minutes at the end of this session to fill in your survey, or you will also receive an email where we will ask you for feedback and to see which are the topics that may interest you. And then, of course, we want to hear your questions that will be addressed at the end of the session. We'll have a specific Q&A session. So please don't hesitate to write down your question in the Click Meeting chat, and they will all address at the end of the session. Well, so now it comes the most interesting part. So I'm very well surrounded by three great speakers from the EU agency. So first we have Rosemary Martin de Souza. So she's the head of communication of this EU agency. So she has background in languages and publishing, and she has been heading up communication initiatives in the EU for over 30 years. First on the education and training area of the Erasmus program, and now in the EU Drug Agency. She also have a certification in digital transformation, leading a disruptive world. We also have Sonia Vicente. So she's digital production manager and on the European Drug Report. She has a degree in translation and has been working for the agency for more than 20 years. Since 2016, Sonia has worked in communication, creating and managing content in the website. And then last but not least, we have David Penny. So he's a web manager and trained as a scientist. He worked most of his professional life in technology. His main area of interest is the user experience, with a particular focus on web and digital publishing. So welcome all, and thank you very much for your time today. So this is how the agenda will look like. So we will first start with how the open data approach can really transform your publication and your way of communicating to an outsider audience. We'll hear more about the European Drug Report, and especially the one that was released this year, and all the publications behind it. And then we will hear more about the case studies. What are the real examples? How is the multiplier that comes after all this transformation that the agency put in place? And then, as you know, at the end, we will have a question and answer session. We will interact with you and reply to your questions. Having said this, I would like to give the floor to David Penny, who will start with how an open data approach can really transform your publications. Thank you very much, David, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Inma. And good morning, everyone, and greetings from, yes, sunny Lisbon. So my name is David, and I'm web manager at the EMCDDA. We'd like to begin by thanking the data.europa Academy for inviting us to speak here this morning. We're big fans of your work, and you've inspired and helped us so much already on our own open data journey. We love the Academy webinars, so it's a real honor for us to find ourselves on this side of the table today. But let me be clear about one thing from the outset. We're not open data experts. In fact, we're not even data experts, or for that matter, data visualization experts. And we're sure that a lot of you here today know a lot more about these topics than we do. And this is certainly the case within our agency. For many of our colleagues, data, statistics, and visualizations are their daily currency. And we often turn to them for advice and guidance in these fields. So you'd definitely be forgiven for wondering why we're standing here today about to give a webinar on open data and data visualization in publications. The reason is because we are, all three of us, professional communicators in an agency that publishes a lot of data and where data does really matter. It's not a peripheral or occasional consideration for our agency, probably similarly for you. It's at the very heart of our work, and getting it right is essential to both us and our customers. So one thing we do actually know a lot about is how to work with data and data visualizations inside the whole publications process. It's one thing to include data and charts in a report that you're authoring on your own. We all know that getting that right can be hard enough, but it's quite another to do this with a large data set, big, with lots of numbers, lots of data visualizations as part of a production line, working to a tight schedule where there are many people involved and where at any point someone can shout stop press because an error was found at the last moment somewhere in the source data and everything needs to be changed. There are always multiple publications being prepared simultaneously across our agency. So as the people ultimately responsible for the actual production of the publications, efficiency is really important to us, and we love anything that improves efficiency. And that is one of the reasons why we're such big fans of open data and why this is the focus of this morning's webinar. Because we'll show you how a shift to a more open data mindset has completely transformed our approach to reports and publications. We'll share with you the drivers behind these decisions to make this change, the challenges we face along the way, but also, of course, the many benefits that such a transformation has brought to us as a publisher and also to our customers. And everything that we're about to share with you happened because we put open data at the center of our communication strategy. Before we dive in, just a quick note of reassurance. Even though we are the EU Drugs Agency, you don't have to know anything about illicit substances, addictions, or drug markets to follow along. Everything we're going to share with you can be applied to any type of data and any area. And also, even though we will show you the actual tools we use behind the scenes to make everything work, nothing we present here is software or tool specific. Because that's the great thing about an open data approach. It can be applied anywhere. And now, over to Rosemary for the first part of the webinar.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you all for being here today. Just a quick word, really. I mean, Inma's covered that in some of the introduction about the European Monitoring Centre for Drugs and Drug Addiction. We still are that agency, actually, and it's only on the 2nd of July that we will become the new agency that Inma mentioned, the European Union Drugs Agency. So we've actually been established in Lisbon since 1993, and we're specialized in illicit drugs and drug addiction and their consequences. So we're looking at things like drug use, drug supply and trafficking, drug treatment. We're looking at many of the illicit substances such as cocaine and cannabis, new synthetic drugs, as well as polysubstance use. This topic actually has a lot of data collection behind it. We have national data provided by a very strong network of national focal points in the EU, Norway, and Turkey. And we've been working with them over many years since the agency was first established to collect sound data sets along following specific protocols. We're also increasingly broadening our collection of local and city level data, and we're working with partners and specialized networks to do this. So basically, you have a big date to watch out for on the 2nd of July 2024. That's 10 more days, when we will become the European Union Drugs Agency. We will have a broader and stronger mandate, and EU preparedness will be at the center of our mission then. So watch this space. Just a word really about the publication that we're going to talk to you about and show you how we've applied an open data approach. So it's a European drug report. We've been publishing that since 1996. When we released the one 2 weeks ago, that was our 29th European drug report. It's our flagship product, and really aims to give a concise overview of the drug situation across all its many different dimensions. Until 2023, it had always been designed for print and PDF, a bit like you see the screenshot on the left. Really, well, we think a very graphic and data attractive and data-rich report. And one thing to note is that over all these years, those 29 years, we've always translated it into all the EU languages. And last year it was over 20 EU languages. And of course, the Translation Center of the European Union helps us with this huge task. So basically, we're talking about a success story, this European drug report, print and PDF, so designed for print and PDF. It was attracting, in the 5 days post-launch, great downloads, one download every two minutes. It was consistently highly rated by our partners and main customers. People really liked it. The press looked out for it. They used to put that in their calendar. It usually came out in June. So there's a strong press and media uptake. We were also delivering and producing this report with established sort of process and sort of tools that everybody knows, Word, Excel, and InDesign. And we were working with technologies that, had been tried and tested over the years. Really something, and producing, you see it on the left there, something that was very visually pleasing, that was, for example, a great success at one of our key conferences, which is the Commission on Narcotic Drugs in Vienna, to have that, to hand it out to visitors and leave in the lobby. So we're talking about a really big success story. So in the second half of 2022, when we wanted to change everything for the next edition of the report, given its great success, you can probably imagine the reaction. Surprise. But I have to say that our decision to switch to a digital first approach wasn't something we did lightly. Yeah? I mean, I explained it. People really liked it. And it wasn't just for the sake of innovating. But as professional communicators, speaking to our customers and giving them broadcasting, giving them information they want is only half the job. It's listening to them is equally important. And what we were picking up were clear signals from our customers that they had moved on from a world where PDF and printed reports met all their information needs. And we thought about this and we thought, no, we really need to adapt. And as I said, this report has so much data in it, the European Drug Report. And we thought, look, we would really like to move this report towards towards making that data more open. Open data was one of the really big drivers for this change. Making the data accessible was another. But there were other related factors that we're going to look at a bit now too when we embarked on this change. What we were finding was that the PDF process was actually really error prone and not at all open data friendly. So very early on in the process, when you start copying and pasting data into different programs, it ceases to be machine readable. That's really early on in the production process when we're designing a print PDF. And the corrections are kind of made directly in the graphics or proofs, emails flying left, right, and center with requests for corrections and everything. A bit like the image on the left, it's a bit chaotic, we found. It's kind of open to error. Difficult to update as the process advances. And one of the things that we found really hard work was keeping a solid set of source data. We found it that we had to often reconstruct the source data at the end. So it's an error. We found, for us at least, it was a pretty error-prone process, especially with the amount of data that goes into the European drug reports. The other thing that we were finding is we were looking at is the accessibility. Accessibility experts recommend creating publications in both HTML and PDF. Of course, HTML is more accessible because the markup is semantic, conveys meaning, and can therefore be better understood by screen readers. We can make PDF accessible by following guidelines and careful planning, and we've been to training to do that. But really, we notice that more often than not, this doesn't actually happen. So most of the PDFs that at least I've come across have pretty poor accessibility and can be difficult for people with visual impairments to read and understand. So the accessibility obstacles course is also something that we had to take into our account when we were making this change. But beyond the driver's open data and accessibility, there are also some other important factors too that I'm going to look at with you. So 60% of our visitors are on mobile. So even if we manage to make our PDFs accessible, the experience on mobile is often poor. I think probably most of us know this from experience. With a PDF on a smartphone, it's hard to read more than a paragraph or two of the text, especially the kind of layout and design we have for the European Drug Report. You saw it back there in one of my slides. You know, double column, graphics slotted in, big tables going across 2 or 3 columns, sometimes flipped sideways for a whole set of annex tables. Of course, the web solved this problem a long time ago with the responsive design that adapts to the screen size of the user's device. But today, no one really designs websites with one screen size, but really that is what PDF does. So, you know, if I list them out again, it's a poor user experience. It wasn't responsive. It was difficult to navigate, difficult to read, difficult to view data and charts, difficult to find information. And we sort of said, why on earth are we doing this to the majority of our customers with our flagship publication? So another consideration. I mean, search engine bots hate PDF. Well, it's a bit of a strong thing to say, but we found that PDFs, well, we know that PDFs rank lower in search results and web pages. Algorithms favor mobile-friendly and accessible information sources. We saw that our very out-of-date content in HTML was being served ahead of an even recent report on a topic. So our new information, say on medical cannabis, was in a PDF, was not being served up first, but another HTML page. And search engines really matter to us because 90% of all our visitors find our information through organic search. So this is this huge consideration for us. Another aspect that we looked at was the downloads. We were sort of tempted, and I already quoted you downloads, 4,500 in the first few days after our launch. And we realized that we and our other stakeholders were equating a download with a person reading the report cover to cover, as if we were reading a book, you know, in the commercial book sales world. But we did have this intuition that wasn't true. but we wanted to back that up with data. So what we did was we did a deep dive on the downloads to try and get a better understanding of what someone actually did after they downloaded the report. Not at all easy, because webmetrics is a black hole. We have really no idea what parts of the PDF they read. We don't know how long they spend reading, whether they find what they want, or if the PDF file remains sitting unread in their downloads folder forever. But as we did our research, a picture did emerge. We noticed that 80% of our visitors were not spending long enough in the PDF to be reading any significant part of it, but were returning to the website shortly afterwards to download and continue their information search. So what we thought was probably, for these people, the PDF was actually more like a very long web page with quite a poor user experience, particularly on mobile. Not only that, we found that the downloads had been dropping off, and that equivalent, it was 40% drop off in the days equivalent to that. I think I showed you the 5-day post-launch numbers early on in the presentation. Those numbers had dropped by 40%. So we thought something's really going on here, and we've got to work something out. So basically, all of those factors that I've just explained to you led to our decision to take a digital-first approach for the 2023 report. We really were quite confident that by doing so, we would address many of the problems that we were encountering. Now, the term digital-first is a bit confusing to some people because PDFs are also digital, yeah, right? But we meant something very specific. And this is what we meant when we were saying we're going digital first. We meant that the data has to remain machine readable throughout the process. We meant that data-driven visualizations need to be generated on the fly, dynamically. We wanted the report to be born. The report had to be born accessible, not re-engineered accessible afterwards. It was really important for us that we made the translation process easy. So that was a key consideration of going digital first. That it be format neutral, search engine friendly, and modular. So we wanted, by making it modular, we wanted to make it easier for people to find the information that they were looking at. This was really something we thought would help with them not being able to, with them returning to the website, as I said earlier on, when they had downloaded the big report and couldn't find what they wanted. Modular was an important step for us there. So what we're talking, of course, is massive change. And in the communications team, we first had to modify the format. We went about this quietly and confidently. We kind of knew what we were doing. We had been moving away from PDF for a number of years anyway, and already had taken a modular approach for some of our other big publications. We do a big publication, I don't know if you know it, with Europol, the EU Drug Markets Report. We had already taken a modular approach then, and also for our Health and Responses Guide. So these sort of trials, pilots, had given us invaluable experience and also enabled us to develop some of the tools we needed with our contractors that help us develop our website. But of course, the European Drug Report was actually a much bigger task with more complicated requirements. And in the communication team, we took an agile approach and worked in sprints to get that going. But really, that wasn't the biggest challenge at all. The biggest challenge for us was on the process side, because the process of making the European Drug Report involves close to 100 people, both inside and outside the agency, all I mean, the process is really carefully orchestrated. I told you it was the 29th one. So it's all orchestrated to function very smoothly with minimum hitches, and it's very sensitive to change. So just to give you an idea of the kind of process, before any of the work can start, our data must be collected from our national focal points and our partners. Then it's cleaned and validated by our data management team. Only then can it be analyzed by our scientific experts, and there is both qualitative and quantitative data to look at in the process. Each section of the report is then written by teams of scientific experts along scientific writers, an editorial team, and the data managers. The data managers will often create the original visualizations. Once we have a draft report, we send it back out to our partners, to the national focal points who've provided the data, so for consultation, to make sure that we haven't made any that we've interpreted what they've provided to us correctly. We also send it to our scientific committee for quality control and for feedback. So, a huge long process, which leads to further rounds of updates, checking, rewriting, and validating. So all of this is happening even before we can get our hands on it for layout or production. And let alone begin the translation process. So although we were quite ambitious in the communication unit for making this change, we were very aware that changing the format and structure would have a massive impact on this process that I've just explained. So we had to really rein in, we really had to balance our ambitions with this reality. And we're still doing that two reports in. But I'm sure you have also all found it's basically talking earlier, and regular stakeholder consultation is really, really crucial in this process. So we've come a bit to the end of the first part of this webinar, and I hope I've given you some insights into why we took our open data approach for a report that was already so successful. There's that thing about if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So if it's not broken, don't fix it. So why did we go for that? But anyway, there is another important thing that I want to underline here. That open data is one of our strategic communication objectives. We've had that in our communication strategy and in the agency's strategic roadmap. It's up there with multilingualism, digital transformation, customer focus. We really took the Open Data Directive very seriously and high into our communication objectives. And that's why it has been a journey that is kind of better understood and appreciated by our colleagues and the partners that we work with. I'm now going to, we're going to move on to the next part of the webinar now. In the next part, what we want to show you is the actual report, and we want to highlight some of its main features. We're going to give you also a peek at the back end and show you how we handle translation, how we manage the data and create the interactive data visualizations for the report. We're going to focus on the report we launched 2 weeks ago, so the 2024 European Drug Report that we launched on the 11th of June. In this report, we built upon and improved the 2023 report, adding new features, fixing issues, and taking on board feedback from customers and stakeholders. And also, in this second version of the report, we really concentrated on improving the open data aspects. So I'm now going to hand over to Sonia, our European Drug Report Digital Production Manager, and Sonia is going to take you through some of these features. Thank you, Sonia.
Thank you, Rosemary, and good morning. So as Rosemary mentioned, I'm going now to show you the European Drug Report 2024 and show you how the structure works, how it is structured, and a bit of the data also, going to translation and data, how it works behind. But the European Drug Report 2024 is structured in modules. So each page is seen as a single web page, a standalone web page, which is very good for search and for web metrics. Because on the PDF you couldn't see that, but it also works as a single report, as a traditional report used to work before, because it's still important for our researchers and stakeholders to have this notion of the European Drug Report 2024. So we have both. So we have 14 modules. We have a main page where you can go to all the modules, and then we have 14 modules, and we still have annexes as part of the package of the EDR, of the European Drug Report. Every module is structured in the same way. So you can see here a screenshot of one of the modules. We always have a side navigation menu where you can jump on the page to each section. Then we have here an intro box with a visual feature that I will talk about after. Then we have always some text, normally always only text. On that text, we can have links to other modules, or we can mention other parts of our website, or we have links to the data visualization below on the sections below on that same page. Then we have the data visualizations, which are generated dynamically from the source data. And at the end of every page, we have the data source, the source data for the graphics that are on that page. So all the data source is available always on every module. So this is the structure of all the 14 modules of the European Drug Report. Even if we've moved to HTML, we realized from the 2023 EDR, that European Drug Report, sorry, I always say EDR because it's the short, the European Drug Report, we realized how it was still important for our stakeholders and visitors to have a PDF. So we also had to offer a solution to give people a PDF. So on every module, on every web page, we have the option to download that page as a PDF. But we also needed to have the full compiled version of the report, of the full package, let's call it like that. So we sorry, we developed a way of compiling all the web pages in a full PDF, which is available from our from our main page. It's very easy to update. If we think about the old PDFs, that they were static from the moment they were done and printed. If they were printed, for example, it was impossible to go back and change. For this PDF, it's very easy to update, because if we need, for some reason, to do a correction in one of the pages, we can always go to the page, correct, for example, a typo, and then we can do a new compilation of the report and then make it available on the web page, on the main web page, in this case, that we have for the European Drug Report. Then we have also developed this visual element that is the identity of the European Drug Report, but it also works as a navigation menu. We have this on our main page, and we have it, you've seen the slide before, we have it in all the modules. It's smaller, but when we click on it, it's a modal, so it becomes bigger. And from there, you can navigate to all the modules from the European Drug Report. All the images can be changed in the back end. We can change the title. We can change the size. So it's a very friendly, it's very easy to use in the back end, and it's very appealing. But it doesn't, this mosaic then it being at first just this visual element of navigation, then it developed to something else. So inside the menu, we have a very powerful search tool that I don't know if you can see, but it's the tab next to the table of contents, where we can search for a term, for example, but it searches in the entire European Drug Report. So it searches within all the modules of the report, and it gives you back the location of where that term is referred to, the link, and the location where it is on that page, on that module. So it's something that it was developed, as I said in the beginning, as something visual, navigation, but then we always have these ideas of creating this user-friendly tool for our users. So I think this is very powerful also. Then going to the data a bit, as I said before, on all the modules, on all the web pages for the modules, at the bottom, the data is available. We are using the license CC BY 4.0, which is the license that the commissions use. So people know exactly how they can use the data and that they can use the data. As I said, all the modules contain the source data that are related to the visualizations on that page. We also have a full data set of all the data in a data catalog, which is one of the annexes of the European Drug Report. And then from last year's European Drug Report to this one, we have developed something that makes it more easier to have the data in Drupal, which is our content management system, and to update data, but we will talk about that a bit later. But just to tell you that all our data is now in CSV format. It is possible to do CSV bulk downloads of the data from the pages or in the data catalog page. And also on every module and below every graphic, for example, there's a screenshot here, an example. Below every data visualization, there's a way of opening the table with the data related to that graphic, map, dashboard, whatever we are seeing. So it's very easy. The data is available from different places, very easy to download. So I think it's available from a lot of places and available to reuse only the data or the graphic. Also, it's possible to save the graphic as it is. Sorry. Then we also have been, from the first edition last year and even more for this year's edition, with all the lessons learned, trying to improve the accessibility of the data visualizations. So not all the data visualization, not all the graphics are interactive, for example, but we also have some static images, for example, photos, but they're also they're assigned with alt text. Then we have the dynamic data visualizations that are embedded, and they always have the div tags and role, image, and alt attributes. This alt text has a dual purpose. It's something also that we have developed for the 2024 European Drug Report. So we have underneath every data visualization, we have a possibility of seeing the alt text. From it's normally you don't see it, but when we there's this small balloon there that we can click, and then it opens the alt text. This is also very good for improving the quality of the alt text, because if you don't see the alt text, normally probably you don't think about it. Well, because you don't see it, it's only read by screen readers. But being there and being available for everyone, then of course we need to think about the quality of the text that is shown there. So it's another improvement that we are working on. Again, for images and for static images or for more complex graphics, we have the text provided underneath also. So here we have a link that can be clicked, and it opens the text that describes, or the text that it's on the image, so people can also access what is on that static image. Then going a bit to the back end and how we manage the data. So the data is provided by our data management team. For the European Drug Report, we normally have around 110 CSV files. And we have developed a custom-made Drupal data node that assigns metadata to each file. So it auto-generates a list and a zip archive. So this is the backend in Drupal. As I said, our content management system we work with. Maybe the screenshot is very small, but it creates a list, and it's very easy to work in the backend. So we can drag and drop and organize the list as we want. It has a description. It has the ID of the table. So very, very user-friendly. Again, it has been developed and custom-made for the European Drug Report, but we can use it for all our products. It's a single source, which means that the data source is just uploaded in one place. When we need to change something, we only change the CSV file on the place where they are uploaded. So imagine if we have different the same data visualization across the website in different web pages, we don't need to go to the different pages and update it, because the source is a single source. So we only need to update it once, and then the changes are done automatically across the pages where the data is used. So the Drupal creates a new version every time we do a new upload of updated files, and it creates a new URI. So there's this identity really applied to the CSV. Going a bit still on the back end, but talking about the translation. Last year, when we started developing the HTML European Drug Report, at the same time, we moved to a new version of Drupal, and we were able to have the translation, the EU translation module, which is the translation centers module that was developed. So agencies, institutions of the EU can translate web pages. So we translate directly from Drupal. We add, for example, here you can see there's a screenshot. Maybe it can be seen. Again, it's too small, but it's like a shopping cart. We are on the web page, and then we can add that web page to the cart, and we send it for translation through the translation module. So the translation is done, and then when it comes back, it's injected again in Drupal. So it's very user-friendly. It's very easy to use, and again, it doesn't leave the Drupal environment. So it's very easy. Of course, it can be revised still, but it's all within Drupal. And this was done also last year with the HTML European Drug Report and our colleagues in the Translation Center. But since we have so many so much data and data visualizations embedded on the pages, we still had to think how that would work with the translation module, because text is easy. Text is passed as text and it comes back as text. But some of the data visualizations have so many tables and some are so big that we needed to find a way of limiting the size of the tables, because some have some elements that don't need to be translated, for example. So we have custom code, a way of limiting and reducing the size of the tables that were sent for translation. So we have a way of extracting terms from the tables and reduce the size of the translation that is sent. It's a feature called constraints that we have developed with our Drupal developers that allows to exclude columns. So we always can tell Drupal, I want to send this table for translation, but exclude column 2, 3, and 4, for example. and all the numerical data that is that we don't want to send, because it's so vital having the numerical data exactly as it was generated, and don't change dots for commas and commas for dots, so that it's important to keep it exactly as it is. So by doing these constraints and reducing the columns that we send, we also send less for translation. Of course, budget wise, it's also less. So as an example, last week we had a big table to send for translation. We have excluded some tables, and we had in the beginning around 400 rows of terms, and at the end, using this constraints feature, we ended up with around 120 more or less terms to be sent for translation. So it really reduces the size, and when it comes back, of course, it only brings the translation of the terms we have sent after. And that was a bit of the European Drug Report, its structure. But now David will talk a bit more about the data and the embedded visualizations and how that works. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Sonia. So, as we've already mentioned, the European Drug Report has always been a graphic-rich publication. It has almost 100 numbered figures in the report. There's a page on the report where you can see a list of figures and tables, and there's about 100 of them. But when you count within them the actual number of individual charts and maps, it's actually closer to 2,500. So just think about that for a second. It would probably be impossible to create an error check this number of charts with a more traditional approach. But even that number of 2,500, it actually pales in significance once you bring translation into the equation, because then we're dealing with a staggering 60,000 individual charts and maps. So that volume of charts would be just humanly impossible to even create, let alone error check. So there are only two reasons we can handle this number of charts and graphics. The first is our digital first approach, and the second is something we call our data visualization library, for want of a better name. And this is actually what we're going to present to you now. So, Sonia, we can stay on that other slide just for a second. Thank you. So our visualization library is the way we generate charts and maps directly from the data. It runs on a visitor's browser, and it only reflects the data that's on the page. It works in tandem with a third-party charting library some of you might know called HiCharts. HiCharts is a really good JavaScript-based tool for our library, I should say, for creating interactive graphics on the web. It's been around for years. We've used it for many years in a more traditional HiCharts way, should we say. But it's a really good tool. So with that, if the data changes, the chart changes. And as we'll see in a few minutes, it's a no-code solution. You don't have to have any programming knowledge to use it, so it can be used by non-specialists. I'm sorry, I should specify, I'm not talking about HiCharts now. I'm talking about our visualization library, which works in tandem with HiCharts. The advantage of this approach is that it makes updating charts and maps easy and error-free. In fact, in theory, we could update those 60,000 charts in a couple of minutes. Now, and I was looking in the chat and I saw some questions, great questions about tools and so on. Now, there are many tools out there to create data visualizations on the web. There's open source, commercial, statistical software, geographical information systems. There's powerful BI tools, cloud-based services, and they all have pros and cons. It actually took us many years to settle, for now anyway, on this solution for our web publishing. But sometimes the best solution is the one that's closest to hand and you're most comfortable with. In fact, this is a good moment to highlight one of the big advantages of having an open data approach throughout the data visualization process. It lets us use different tools at the various stages of the production process, depending on who is working on the data and what their goal is. So for example, statistical analysis might be done by a data manager, and someone else might use Power BI to create some initial visualizations, or Excel just to quickly try out some ideas. But at each successive stage, the data can be passed down the line, still machine readable, as Rosemary mentioned at the start of the presentation. And sorry, and we can collaborate in parallel, all feeding off this source data. So before we actually see the data visualization library in action, just let me explain a little bit how the library works from a technical viewpoint, because it'll make the next part a little bit easier if you like to understand how technical things work. So this is just a kind of an idealized schema of things. So in step one, a visitor requests a URL page on our website. Let's imagine a page on the European Drug Report, and our web server returns a HTML web page. This is how it works for any web page anywhere, right? So step two, the visitor's browser parses the HTML page and begins laying out that page. At the same time, it requests the files like style sheets, images, and scripts that the page specifies and that are needed for the page to look correct. And our web server starts sending them back. One of the files that it sends back is the data visualization library, which is a JavaScript file. So in step three, the data visualization library is loaded by the browser and it inspects the page for what we call chart parameters. We'll see what they are in a second. They're actually just little snippets of code that tell the library about charts that should be placed on the page. The library combines these instructions with a specified data table to build a JavaScript object that can then be understood by our chosen charting library, in this case, HiCharts, which is also loaded on the page at the same time. In step four, the charting library then inserts the charts or maps in the required place on the page. So that's enough with the theory. Let's see some examples. So in this example, you can actually see the chart parameters. So chart parameters are actually just empty HTML tags. Specifically, we use divs, but it could actually be any tag. But they're empty HTML tags, which we insert on the page in the location where we want the chart to appear. We do this in exactly the same way that we would, say, insert a static image. And what we do here is we make use of the data dash attribute, which is part of the HTML standard, and it's designed to allow website publishers and developers to insert data within a tag. So as a web publisher, you have complete choice over what comes after the data dash part. In our case, we always use the convention data dash chart dash something else. And the thing that follows the data dash chart, that's basically the instructions that will then drive our data visualization library to do whatever it is we want it to do. And it's best to look at an example such as here. So data chart table tells the library where to get the data from. You might be wondering, what does that mean? It's got a name. It's actually the reference to an ID of the table. Because elsewhere, as Sonia mentioned, we're using a single source method to embed tables on the page. And at the same time as we embed them, we give them a unique ID. So you can see a snapshot of the table itself beneath the little code snippet. The table, in case you're wondering, it's prevalence data. So it's prevalence data with various values of data, including a gender breakdown and a total value for prevalence. On the right, you can see what the chart will look like. So just a small bit of code, and you can see with just a few snippets of HTML code and a data table, we can create a column chart pretty easy. So let's look at another example. So again, we're using exactly the same table, but this time we just changed a couple of parameters. So this time what we're doing is we're sorting the data. We're doing that directly from the data visualization library. We don't have to do it in the Excel file. There's a whole pile of reasons that it's better to do that on the data visualization library side rather than in the data. So then we can sort the chart. Then we can also just change its color very easily. Now let's have a look at another example. So we're still working with exactly the same table, but now you can see it's quite a different chart. So this is a mirror bar chart. So for a mirror bar chart, you actually need two columns of data. So we modify the data chart dash transform keep columns attribute, and we tell the visualization library this time to use columns 1, 8, and 9, and ignore all the other columns. So we also use the data chart color attribute to define which pair of colors we want, in this case, yellow and green. Let's see another example. So now we're using something totally different, same data table, but we're creating a map, or specifically a quantitative choropleth. We use a lot of these. I'm sure you do too if you work with any kind of geographical data. So to do this, we change the column to use the data. And what you can also see is that we've added some text for the legend that the map uses. And I'm just going to talk about that briefly. And I also noticed 1 or 2 questions coming up on that. It's a huge issue for dynamic data visualizations and specifically translation. So what we've done here in this example is that we've inserted the text inside the attribute. So we've inserted it inside a data attribute, but in reality, we don't actually do this. And we don't do this for 2 reasons. First, it would make it really hard to edit the text because, as I say, we don't work alone. An editor might come in and say, listen, you've got the wrong legend there. I want to change it. We can't tell the editor, oh, just go into source code and modify that data chart attribute. So it would make it very hard to edit it, but it would also be impossible to translate that text. As Sonia mentioned earlier, we're using the Translation Center's translation module, which is based on a standard Drupal translation module. But that doesn't it doesn't modify or translate text that's within data attributes, and nor should it. So what we do instead for text, in fact, is we insert it in a dedicated translation lookup table. That's what we call it. So it's the visualization library can access that table, and then we can simply refer to the text we want on the chart and using a unique term ID. This is actually, I think anyway, I'm pretty sure it's a common technique used by software for translation and regionalization, and has the added advantage that the text can easily be edited and updated by anyone. Let's see one more example, still with the same data table. So in this example, with just a few changes, we're easily changing the look of the chart again. This time we're creating a bubble map, and we're specifying a different data column. And you might be wondering, how does the library know where to place the bubbles? In this case, it actually has a small onboard database of known locations, and it recognizes the country names. But in most cases, we don't actually use country names or place names because they can easily change during translation. So instead, we use ISO country codes or standard latitude, longitude coordinates. However, just to be aware, the data visualization library doesn't yet support NUTS. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm not actually sure. But you know what I'm referring to, the geographical units. And the main reason for this is we actually don't have very much data of that sort at the moment. But we could add that to the library quite easily. So on this map, we've assigned some labels and specified the font size. Because charts and maps are interactive, you can also see that we can easily assign tooltips, and we can more or less decide whatever tooltips we want to show. So we can choose which columns we want to appear using the data chart tooltips keys parameters. Now let's look at an example with a different table. So this table is a very simple table, but this table contains some temporal data, yearly data. We have a lot of this kind of trends type data as well, as I'm sure you do. The chart on the top is doing something very common with temporal data, and it's displaying it in kind of a trend chart. In this case, it's a stacked area chart on the right. In the bottom chart, we're still using the same data, but what we're actually doing is we're narrowing it down, and we're selecting 1 year, and we're showing it as a pie chart. So to do this, we've removed most of the columns for the pie chart. We've removed most of the columns, except the one that's needed for the display. Data tables aren't always in the format, shape, order that we want for our charts, or sometimes we might want to show only part of the data. In these cases, it's useful to be able to make these changes with the visualization library itself, instead of, for example, creating multiple versions of the same table. We were doing this before. At some point in the visualization library, it would in fact work directly with a table, and every time we needed a slightly different version of a chart, we would have to get the data and transform it. This is very, the way we're doing it now is much easier to use. So the library actually has a whole range of options to modify data tables. to better suit the chart that is being displayed. For example, we can transpose a table, we can sort the data, we can filter out rows or columns, we can even combine data from two different tables to create a whole new table. And the process is non-destructive, so the source data table can be reused any number of times. Let's see the next example. Okay, so in this example, the code for the chart parameters is a lot longer, and I'm not going to bore you with it, but it's more complex than all of the previous versions. What that code will do is it'll create a data explorer. But the important thing to know is that it follows exactly the same principle as everything we've seen before. It just has more instructions. We're not doing anything different to what we did previously to create this visualization. All the parameters in our instructions are given as data attributes, just as in previous examples. So to give one example, the attribute data chart explorer filters is how we create the data filters at the top of the map. Without going into the details, we look next to the two main types of more complex data visualizations we can create with the data visualization library. Yeah, so there are basically two types. Data explorers, they're designed to allow users to explore large data sets, as the name implies. They typically include a main graphic, such as a map, which changes depending on how the data is filtered. And the filters can be created as buttons or drop-down lists, and they can filter by column or row, depending on how the data is structured. While data explorers are always highly dynamic, dashboards, on the other hand, which you can see on the right, they're usually simpler and they have no drill downs. They typically consist of multiple simpler charts within a frame. They can be fixed or dynamic depending on what we want to show and how we want to use them. The great thing about the data visualization library is that we can actually quite easily create both types of these visualizations. And both explorers and dashboards are fully customizable. We can modify almost everything about them. So now let's just talk about the map and chart generator. So earlier we said that the data visualization library was a no-code solution. And this is true in the sense that the chart parameters contain no code or logic, right? They are merely instructions in the form of data attributes, which are covered, which are converted into logic by the library itself. If you like, you can think of it as an API. But most people aren't comfortable working with HTML code and attributes, which is why we have the map and chart generator. So, for example, even though Sonia and me will work a lot with source code, we wouldn't expect someone else to create a visualization or map going into HTML. So, this is the map and chart generator is how we have it's our no-code tool for working with the data visualization library itself. It lets users build maps and charts by uploading their data with a simple copy paste, and then, as we'll see in the next slide, just using the visual interface on the left panel to change the settings until they have a visualization they're happy with. Using that setting panel, they can update most of the instructions we saw earlier, but without needing to know any HTML code or the syntax or commands used by the visualization library. Once they finish, they can export the chart parameters, which can then be embedded on a web page in Drupal. And it's open data by design. It's actually not possible to show a chart on our website without the data being also made available in a separate table, either on the page or as a CS feed that is linked to the page. Now let's just look at some lessons we've learned. So just specifically on data visualizations. So working with data visualizations in digital first publications, we've learned a few things which we'll share now. Of course, your mileage may vary, as the saying goes, and depends on your data, the tools, your level of expertise, what you're trying to do, etc. This is our takeaways. So first and foremost, and we hope that this has come across, using an open data approach makes the whole process of creating and updating and translating data visualizations just a lot easier and faster and more efficient. And also, you can make your life a lot easier by using a single source approach. We didn't always do that. Avoiding the duplication of data will not only make it easier for you when it comes to updating, but it also makes it easier for users to find and reuse your data because it's less confusing. We say that, but we recognize that we still have some work to do in this area sometimes. Data explorers are great, and they're very popular with our users. But in digital publications, keep in mind that they don't really work in PDF for obvious reasons. You can't click buttons in a PDF or in a print publication. So it's better, when possible, to use them more to complement the story. Similarly, while dashboards are visually pleasing on desktop and in PDF, on mobile, they can sometimes be tricky, because sometimes especially if you're using a responsive design, those visualizations will collapse into a vertical list, and you can effectively have a lot of mini charts to scroll through. And for some users, that can be just a little bit overwhelming. It's definitely good practice to keep text and graphics, which are related, close together. This is good for accessibility, but also general ease of reading. And then finally, as you develop your content, it can really help if your writers and authors can actually see how the elements on the page will appear. Where possible, we try to create prototype versions of digital publications early on, even if we're using draft text and visualizations with non-final data. So that's the end of this part of the webinar. And now over to Rosemary.
Thank you very much, David. I'm aware that there's so much activity going in the chat and lots of questions that you'd like us to answer. So I'm just going to move quite quickly through some examples that you'll be able to study in more detail once you get the slides. So really, we wanted to give you some examples of the media uptake that we have seen from people using our open data. So here, for example, you have The Economist. It is in their graphic details section. They published an article. The link is below. Basically, the original graphic was in the drug-induced deaths chapter of the European Drug Report, and they picked that up and supplemented it with other open data that we have in the statistical bulletin and also the Eurostat population data, and produced that graphic with it. And in fact, if you go to that graphic detail on that link, you will see that there are various graphics using different aspects of our data on that topic. Another example of how someone's picked up our open data is this Czech television website. If you see in that graphic there, what they've created is a mini data explorer made with Flourish, using the drug prevalence data from the European Drug Report. So actually a bit of that table that a larger bit of that table that David was showing. So that's really a good example of how we have made our data easier to use and how they have helped us reach a wider audience. Austria Presseagentur, so a press agency. We're used to press agencies picking up our information, writing 3 or 4 paragraphs and it appearing all over the world, but not so much the actual graphic, to have an actual graphic in the press agency article. And so this was very, very interesting, and I believe we included that source table that Sonia showed directly under the at a glance table dashboard, and we feel that that they were able to pick up that data themselves, help themselves to our open data, and this infographic has really appeared in multiple Austrian media outlets. So really how a press agency can multiply a message. We then have, we had quite a big article in The Guardian concentrating on cocaine in Europe and using multiple sources. This example illustrates kind of how we work in with this partnership with the SCORE network, which is working on one of those city data sets that I mentioned earlier on in the webinar, so on wastewater analysis. Really shows how collaborating with different organizations and multiple data sources can give a very good result. But what I really like about this is that how The Guardian took our data. We often present this data in a bubble map, and they've done it in a different way. So we can really be inspired by other people using our data to present it differently. And then just one last example is the Urban Journalism Network. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, but they aim to promote high quality digital journalism, collaborating many big cities across Europe. And just as the wastewater data set that we always release in March, with the SCORE network I just mentioned, was one data set that this journalism network was very interested in, and so we were able to share with them prior to the launch of the wastewater publication all the data that they needed so that they could work together and produce this. So really a nice example of a good co-creation with data from SCORE, EMCDA, and the Urban Journalism Network. I now want to hand over to David for a couple of minutes just to wrap up, but then we do need to get on with the questions. So David, perhaps if we can just draw some of our lessons learned.
Yeah, thanks, Rosemary. Yeah, sorry, I'm going to run through this very quickly. So let's just recap. So the benefits of digital first approach, first, it makes the production process very efficient compared to print to PDF, much less error prone. I hope that's clear. It's very easy to update data and data visualizations because of single source in particular. It's very good for search engine ranking for most of our pages, and we've seen that. We've had very positive feedback and more buy-in for open data from our stakeholders because of it. We see that the data journalists are directly using the data, and changes are generally system-based. So this is what's really great. When we make changes in general, we can use them across all of our products and publications, and then we can use them next year as we go along. So it's a really good use of your, I think, investment in time. So now we'll also just see our lessons learned from, lessons learned. So what did we learn? So it's really important because this is about change. As you're moving throughout this process, obviously involve your stakeholders early in the process and update them regularly on what's happening. PDF, and I have to say I was a bit surprised by it, but PDF is still really important for many of our stakeholders. So you need a dual approach, HTML and PDF. Be aware of the impact on upstream workflows with data management teams, editors and writers as part of your digital transformation, as well as your external partners for consultation, because they might be used to getting your publications in a certain way if you're consulting with them. And be aware that translating data can require a different approach to text. As Sonia mentioned, we learned that last year that we couldn't as easily update or translate our data as we could our text. And then finally, what are our next steps in on our own open data journey? So first of all, we hope to provide more data formats and additional view modes for visitors. I saw some of the questions in the chat, and I just thought there's lots of ideas and lots of ways we can keep improving that the offering. And we want to explore more automation for the actual data updating. We do want to improve accessibility for our visualizations, but also for our reports. We will continue the digital transformation across our range of products and publications so that it's very systematic. Of course, we keep raising awareness with our colleagues and partners of the benefits of and the needs for open data. And we just generally keep improving our open data offering, especially following data.europa.eu guidance and uploading our data sets. And so that's the end of our presentation. I want to thank everyone for listening to us, and especially once again, the Data Europa Academy for inviting us to talk.
Well, so thank you very much for this great presentation. I have to say I was very impressed. I already knew your product, but I have to say that I was very gladly surprised about all the backend and all the work behind. So really congratulations for everything, because we also see that it has served as an inspiration, not only for us, the people who are here, but also to journalists that are using it as a reference. So this is great. So congratulations. We have a lot of questions. I'm glad to see that some of them were already addressed throughout your presentation, because you were very well addressing all the points on the process of improving your report. So I would go very quickly through some of the questions that we have on the chat. So one of them is on link data, because we saw that as a follow-up step, you are thinking about other formats of publication and you're exploring other possibilities. But is your plan to publish this data in the future as link data?
Right now, I'd say not immediately. I think that's, definitely on the journey. I think it's further down the road, even for us. I mean, we know what linked data is. I don't think we're there yet, but we would certainly think it's an important destination point.
To explore, indeed.
Yes.
Indeed, one step at a time.
Yeah, exactly.
Great, that's great. Then regarding the data sets and the catalog where you find them, and this for all of you, whoever who wants to address it. Do you have, because I'm not sure if this was really addressed. If no, you can repeat it to us. So do you have a DCAT AP record, and in which data catalogs can be found? And do you have a specific code as open source in a specific repository as a GitHub?
No, we don't. I mean, a simple answer. Sorry to be giving more no answers. But actually, just what's great about hearing that question even is it's something we will look into and try to provide. Again, further down the road, I think. Our data catalog, we do have a data catalog, so we're going one step at a time. I think for us, that's just having a data catalog, a place on our website where we upload all of the data in whatever format, whether it's in a publication or whether it's coming from something more robust like our statistical bulletin, which is an annual consulted process, or our city level data, but data is coming from all over the place. So just having a data catalog which you can search and which has metadata in it, that's the kind of first step, and then we look at those other more advanced steps later, I hope.
Indeed. So, but it's good to see that there are also like ideas from from the participants on some step forward, which is great. So, one of the attendees was asking about the challenges on these data-driven visualizations generated on the fly. What are the challenges that you encounter in the process, or what are the things that you would like to? Is there anything specifically that you would like to share with the audience for those who are thinking about generating these type of visualizations?
On the fly? Yeah.
Yes.
I think, I mean, I'll answer then. Maybe Sonia and Rosemary have something to add to it. So I think we've been doing that for years. I'm saying, and this is not saying this, right? We've been doing for years. We've been adding on the fly visualizations into our web products. But doing it once off is one thing, but making it kind of part of a system, that's a totally different way of thinking. And you have to, for us anyway, we had to kind of step back and abstract and not think about, in fact, not think about specific visualizations, but always think about, okay, how can we do that in the system? So that's why we had that thing, all those obscure syntaxes, data chart thing, because we're thinking, yeah, we want to build that into the system. So next time someone asks me to do a bubble map, I don't have to recode it. I have it in my sort of code base, so I can just use that easily. So that's kind of the general approach. And then the other more technical thing, I think for us, I'd say there's two things. First, translation, which Sonia was sort of addressing, but I think translation was kind of learning curve. In fact, we're still working with the Translation Center on that, but we think we've made quite a lot of improvements. But the idea of extracting terms from a large data set so that we could then create the visualizations. And then remember, we're using filters as well, and the filters depend on the terms. So we have to get everything working in tandem. But so there's kind of a lot of thought involved in that. And the other thing is, I think the thing that really got us was, and I have to be honest, I had no idea that creating a dynamic PDF from dynamic data visualizations was so hard. I naively, and I've been working in the web for years, I naively thought, yeah, creating a PDF is pretty straightforward. I actually thought it was some kind of XML markup, but it's not. PDF is such a kind of a different beast. So that was incredibly hard, and we were really lucky to work with two very good developers for Drupal to help us with that process. Without them, it just wouldn't have been possible, I think, to get the dynamic charts created on the PDF on the fly.
Indeed, indeed. I think also like involving stakeholders and experts on the field, like to see what are the possibilities, is indeed very, very important. I have also a question. This is a bit of from my side. For because in the at the beginning of the presentation, I think it was Rosemary that was mentioning about how you place it into now the strategic objectives of your organization, this open data mindset, which is something very meaningful because you are really driving change in your own agency. But I was thinking, based on the story that you were telling, would you say that this was coming from the bottom up approach, implementing this open data strategy? Or how would you say that it was actually listening to the users that were the drivers of this change? Or how do you say it?
Thank you very much. I think I take. I'd say, look, we were we were very inspired by what you were doing on the open data portal. We were already very interested in accessibility. We were one of the very first, the communication team, one of your early adopters, I think, of uploading our data sets to the portal and so on. So, meaning bottom up, if you mean that it was the communication unit that put it in the agency strategic objective, it was us, we put it up there. But what we also were getting feedback from was from the national focal points that I mentioned in my presentation a few times, who are absolutely key. They were giving us data that we were processing and publishing in a print PDF, but they were not able to access kind of that data back themselves once it had been put into the different visualizations, once they had do it. So we were hoping by developing open data to somehow to create this kind of positive feedback circle. The more that we make that available, the data available back to our users, especially the national focal points, the more they will see the need to keep and to our specialized partner next to keep working on it and giving it to us and improving it and so on. So that was really how we came to the open data being a strategic
Indeed.
objective. So a couple of ways in really. Yeah.
Indeed, that can indeed serve as an inspiration for other organizations or businesses that are thinking about the same, about where to get started. No, so I think this is also very relevant to share this your experience. We have one more, I would say, technical question on the process of creating the reports. So you mentioned custom developing for no. Developing custom pages in Drupal on the back end. How was the process? Was it very cumbersome? What were the challenges that you were facing in the process? I don't know if you did. Okay, Sonia.
Maybe Sonia, do you want to answer that?
Sorry. Yeah, so we started our main starting point. We had already the custom page because we were using what we call our basic page to build the report. So it was already in Drupal. Everything else really came, I think last year was such a good start because we were developing so much last year to do the HTML report. But then we learned so much from it that we really managed to develop a lot more for this year's report. So, of course, I think the difficult part is the part related to the data and how the data, we go from having data on each page to having the data in a single source that can feed so many pages. But creating just one page, it really started by being just a basic page with text and headings that it's so well structured that then Drupal recognizes already which are the heading twos that go to the navigation side menu, for example. But I think then everything else comes, when you are brainstorming with colleagues and have how we can show this in a better way, navigate from page to page, have this visual element that helps people or identify it. So yeah, the starting point was easy. Then really, I think the data is the main thing that took us more time to develop all the backend ways of having it in this way that is fits perfectly for the EDR and other pages of the web pages of the MCDDA. But yeah, at the same time it's fun. So for us it's so much fun to try and get to this, to these perfect ways of feeding the pages, of embedding data, of having the visuals in a appealing way, of course, and all the elements that we have added this year for the alt text, for having the data sets just below the graphics. So small things that while you're building the basic pages, you go along and you add things that just create then, I think, an appealing web page for
Mhm.
people to read. So yes, no, it was not cumbersome for the basic, probably for the data side, yes, and for the translation, how we deal with especially data, how we do that to be translated also in a way that it doesn't cost thousands of euros to translate a table. So yes and no, fun, all fun at the same time.
All fine at the end. Yeah, it's true. And also we saw that like open data was a very important element, like to transform in a more machine readable format and make it more accessible in order to like do a process that was sustainable actually. So we're finalizing this webinar. I would like to thank very much Rosemary, David, and Sonia for the wonderful presentation. Inspired us a lot, even to us. I was taking notes, even like for some things we could do in our organization. So I just take a couple of takeaways. So we saw that open data is a journey of transformation, and we saw with this real example from this agency, the European Drug Agency. The shift of the open data mindset is possible, and it really leads to really a change of approach in publication, dissemination of information, and it's an essential element to improve the communication and visualization of data. Listening is a driver of change. Rosemary was mentioning before that 50% is active listening in communication, and it's so important to listen to our users to understand what they want, and that's how it all got started. Accessibility is very important as well. We have to make publications suitable for everyone. And at the same time, in the whole process of creating it, it's important that we involve all our stakeholders with consultations to ensure that we're going to have the amazing product that you actually develop. So I really hope that this inspired the audience as much as me in this open data journey, and you also embark on this. We are very happy to have had all this time. And I would like to thank you and also the attendees for the great questions. So just to close up very quickly, we have a couple of one activity coming up and also other webinars. So the next webinar will be on the 20th of June on the use case observatory. Is one report where we study several use cases on how they are using open data to change their business models, and we track the progress over time. So we will hear more about these stories. So I really encourage you to go and know more about how they're using open data from a more pragmatic point of view, from a business perspective. So as you see, you have the access to the survey that is very important for us to get better and to make sure that we're developing courses and materials according to your needs. Having said this, I would like to thank you all for your attention today and for the great time, especially to the speakers, because I think we all got very interesting insights for today and for our work. Thank you very much, and have a nice Friday and weekend.